First off, is Helton going to be a Hall of Famer when he retires?
I think so. You know, when you think about the Colorado Rockies, one of the more new franchises in Major League Baseball, about they've been in existence for a little bit over 20 years or just around that time. You know, this guy has been there from the start, it seems like, and he really has. You know, this guy, he basically helped lead the Rockies to their magical run to the World Series in 2007. Obviously, they came up short against the Boston Red Sox, and a couple other playoff runs did help and lead him to. And he's been great, fantastic mentors in Carlos Gonzalez and Troy Tulowitzki. The guy's numbers, 320 for his career, 354 home runs, 1,345 RBIs. Obviously, you could argue that he plays in arguably the best hitter's park out there in Coors Field. Ball seems to fly out of there no matter whose bat it comes off of. But yes, he is slowing down before having surgery on his knee, I believe, this year. He was hitting 238 with 7 home runs and 37 RBIs. Obviously, he can still produce a little bit in the middle of that Rockies lineup that has been very disappointing this season due to the injury to Troy Tulowitzki and the slumping that has been going on with Carlos Gonzalez here in the second half. Definitely the Rockies, one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball this season. But I think this guy will come back for a season or two, and I do think if he puts up decent numbers these next 2 years, he'll get into the Hall of Fame. First ballot.
Yeah, Todd Helton, one of my favorite players to watch in my entire lifetime. He's always been like the model of consistency in baseball and really has defined the first base position in the game today. Not so much, I don't know, it's become much more of a position where great defense can be a big factor, unlike it was in the 90s. Let's go to another first baseman here. This guy is about one of the greatest hitters ever. Jim Thome, such a great player for all these years, starting to be done with his career a little bit, kind of laboring out right now at age 41. But you think he's got another year in him, or is this it for him?
I wouldn't be surprised to see another year in him. He's a good DH that you can stick in there 2-3 times a week. You know, he's still a big guy. He's always been a big guy. This guy has never had steroids linked to his name. 611 career home runs. You know, obviously, if we're talking about Hall of Fame candidacy, you got to put this guy first ballot. I mean, once you get past 500, that's pretty obvious to put in the Hall of Fame. Never really hit for average in his career. Had his great days with the Cleveland Indians and the Philadelphia Phillies. Then had some solid years with the Chicago White Sox. Now, kind of, bouncing around a little bit, went from the Twins to the Phillies. Now, has a chance to get into the postseason, and you never know what happens when you can get into the postseason with the Baltimore Orioles. So, certainly Jim Thome has been on a lot of good teams in his career, and you just can't ignore that 611 home runs. I say this guy could stick around for another 2 years, kind of like Jason Giambi has been doing, but I don't see this guy being an everyday guy like he once was.
Yep, Jim Thome, much like Todd Helton, one of the defining first basemen of his time. Okay, now let's jump to our first outfielder and our only outfielder we're going to talk about here. He hasn't been in the league nearly as long as any of these guys, but he's just as old. We're talking about Ichiro Suzuki, who has been absolutely spectacular since going to the Yankees, really having a career resurgence with them, actually posting almost better numbers in every single category than he did this season with the Mariners. Is Ichiro having a career resurgence? Are we going to see some more years of something closer to his prime than what we've seen, or is he going to fall back down to earth pretty soon here?
Well, obviously that short porch helps in New York. He's really done well since coming on to the Yankees. He fell off a lot in 2011. He went from hitting 315 in 2010 to only hitting 272 in 2011. This is a guy that if he wants to hit over home runs, he'll hit a home run. This guy is always looking to slap the ball the other way or beat out an infield base hit to one of the middle infielders. This guy has been solid throughout his career. He came to the league in 2001, led the Mariners to a 116-win season. Also taking home his Rookie of the Year and MVP honors, something that we might do with Mike Trout this season, but Obviously, my pick, well, not to get off subject, but my pick is Miguel Cabrera for the AL MVP, just in case you were wondering. But, yeah, he's done very well with the Yankees. He's boosted his average back up to 283. It was around 260 when he was dealt to New York around the trade deadline. He had a great series this weekend against the familiar foe, the Oakland Athletics. When we're talking about Hall of Fame candidacy, you're really on the edge. This guy's only been in the league for about 11 seasons. Like you said, he's an older guy because he came over from Japan. But, this guy, when you think about Seattle Mariners baseball, other than Ken Griffey Jr., this is the guy that you think about. Ichiro really brought all the fans into Safeco Field when the Mariners were struggling in the mid-2000s. And this guy just put up spectacular numbers, including a 372 season back in 2004. He broke George Sisler's hit record, had a 262 hits that season. So it's going to be hard to ignore the fact that this guy won't get into the Hall of Fame, but first ballot, I'm not too sure.
Personally, I think he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. You look at his collective numbers, in my opinion, and they just speak volumes. I'm not a guy who's going to really discriminate against someone who came over from Japan later in his career. The numbers he put up in Japan were astounding as well, just like his MLB numbers, even better, actually. So, personally, I think he's first ballot. I think, much like Sandy Koufax, he's put in 11 years where he's been the best player at his position, best player at what he does. So that's why I think he's first ballot. Okay, last player I want to talk about is our only pitcher here, Mariano Rivera. He's not pitched very often this year because of his just awful injury. So such a shame. How many years is he going to be back for? And as a reliever, it's harder to get into the Hall of Fame, but is he a first ballot guy?
Oh, no doubt. He is the best closer of all time. Obviously, Trevor Hoffman had that edge for a little bit in career saves, but Mariano Rivera definitely the best closer of all time. And his postseason ERA is astounding. It's under 1. This guy has been consistent throughout his entire career, and he's pitched in so many pressure situations. He has a lot of World Series rings under his belt, I believe 5 or 6. This guy busted into the league in 1995, of course, only pitched in 9 games this season after tearing his ACL, very unfortunately. This guy's a fun guy to pitch, obviously, fun guy to watch pitch. Obviously, he's fallen off a little bit in his career, coming down here in the last 3 seasons. He's tore his ACL this season. The guy doesn't throw mid-90s like he used to. He stays 90, 91, 92, but that cutter is still one of the nastiest in baseball, and I expect him to be around for another 2 seasons. But Rafael Soriano and David Robertson have done a fantastic job at the end of that New York bullpen, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Mariano Rivera possibly, very possibly, go somewhere else to end his career, but kind of like Trevor Hoffman did going from the Padres to the Brewers.
If Mariano Rivera stays, is he the setup man there or the closer?
Oh, you got to get this guy. You can't kick out Mariano Rivera from closing. This guy is the best closer of all time. 608 career saves. He was a setup guy in the mid-90s when he first broke into the league, but since then this guy has been the closer. This guy has been the guy to shut the door for the New York Yankees, and if he comes back to the Yankees, which I think he will for another season, then there's undoubtedly he'll be the closer. And if something goes completely wrong, then I say you move him somewhere else. But right now, if he were to come back, no doubt, even with the emergence of Rafael Soriano as closer there, no doubt you got to give it to Mariano Rivera. He worked for it and he deserves it just because of the household name that he has and because of the career numbers that he has.
Okay, this has just been a great topic here to talk about. A great deal of insight for you viewers. A lot of knowledge here that's possessed by Chris Sylvester. Okay, we're going to jump topics here to the NFL, and then we're going to quickly jump to college football to wrap up our show. I just want to talk about 5 teams in the NFL that are having some pretty different years than one would have expected. And the first one is the obvious candidate, the New Orleans Saints. What can you tell me about their struggles? It seems like they just aren't as good as they once were, even though they basically have the same team.
Well, the New Orleans Saints are obviously a team that deal with a lot of turmoil in the offseason. Sean Payton's not going to be able to coach them. Jonathan Billman just got his suspension lifted, and Drew Brees had those contract issues in the offseason with the New Orleans Saints. So, obviously, this team has kind of been in shell shock the first 3 weeks of the season, but it's not like they're getting blown out by any means. They've lost all their games by one possession, so, they're losing close ball games. They're just off guard. The chemistry is not there for them. Kind of just need it. They need to get it rolling soon, though. 0-3, that's a terrible start for anybody in the NFL, even the worst teams in the NFL. Like, honestly, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars is the worst team in the NFL, but they already got a win under the belt. So definitely this New Orleans Saints team is going to need to get it rolling because their schedule is not pretty the rest of the way. Next week they're at Green Bay. The week after that they come home and play San Diego. I think Drew Brees always gets up extra special for that San Diego game because he was riding the bench behind Phillip Rivers before he was dealt to New Orleans in San Diego. And then they had their bye week. They head to Tampa Bay. You never know what kind of team you're going to get at Tampa Bay. Josh Freeman on and off. Then they go to Denver. Hopefully Denver, for Denver's sake, can get it figured out by then. Back home against Philadelphia, against Atlanta, Oakland, or San Francisco at Atlanta, at the New York Giants, versus Tampa Bay, at Dallas, and versus the Carolina Panthers. So certainly not an easy road the rest of the way for the New Orleans Saints, and they're going to have to get it figured out soon because I really think it's because of their rushing game. Pierre Thomas has only carried the ball 13 times, but he has compiled 127 yards. This guy needs to get all of the carries because Mark Ingram certainly is not getting it done in the backfield there. And Drew Brees certainly barely completing 50% of his passes. Certainly needs to get it going, being the leader of that team again.
Okay, next team I want to talk about, really the polar opposite of the Saints, a team that wasn't even supposed to win, 6 games in a season this year, and yet they're 3-0 this season. They just beat the Philadelphia Eagles 27-6. They have two quarterbacks who aren't exactly the best in the NFL, and Kevin Cobb and John Skelton, but they're 3-0. Are the Cardinals legitimate NFL playoff contenders?
It's too early to tell. It seems like every year we have that team in the NFL that starts off just fantastic, but can't hold it the rest of the way. This is a team that doesn't have the toughest schedule in the world. They do play San Francisco twice. They do have a game where they play versus Detroit, Green Bay, and Chicago. But other than that, all the other games for them are certainly winnable. This team has been a shock. It's the obvious choice. There's not been a player that has just stood out, but things have gone right for this team when they needed to. It's 2016 when the first week of the season when they were able to hold Russell Wilson and Seattle out of the end zone when they were driving down to potentially win the game in the last minute, and of course had that huge fumble last week against the New England Patriots, which it was able to set up a field goal for them to take the lead, and then New England missed a fairly easy field goal, and then the very overrated Philadelphia Eagles came in and got smashed against Arizona today, like I expected. So, it's too early to tell for this team. They've beaten some very good ball clubs, but it's going to be a telltale in the next coming weeks if they can hold this together. I mean, certainly a 7-0 start is not, it's not out of the question for the team. They play Miami next week, then they go to St. Louis, then they come home to play Buffalo, then they go to Minnesota. Obviously, Minnesota 2-1 after knocking off San Francisco today, but they can start off 7-0. They're legitimate 7-0 contenders, and it's just going to be a matter of time if we're going to see if this team just had things going right for them, or they are legitimate contenders and have the talent to get it done.
Yeah, pretty much agree with everything you said there, except the 7-0 part. I don't think they're going to be able to go 7-0. But personally, the way they've looked, especially if Kevin Cobb can repeat his 127 passer rating performance today, this to me looks at least like a wild card team. Okay, next is the team I think gets the least amount of coverage in football. I'm just kidding about this, by the way. The New York Jets. They've actually looked okay, except for one key component, Mark Sanchez. Is this team a playoff contender, or are they just going to fade into 8-8 football like they usually do?
surprise me to see them go 8-8 once again. You know, this team has so much, turmoil around